Thank you, Arindom. Indeed, for our viewers, I would also like to take this opportunity to ask a couple of questions to you, given your experience in this domain.
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, would be the key bottlenecks from banks and regulators' point of view to adopt such kind of Earth observation and other geospatial data as a legitimate source of evidence for credit risk assessment of farm loans or for the larger agri sector to actually use it for decision making at scale?
Right, Pratibha. Very interesting and a very important question. Now, we need to understand that the banking sector, licensed banks, are the most regulated business sector in the world, and they need to be regulated. And it's a job of the central bank to protect the interest of the depositors and to ensure that we have very stable financial systems. And the underwriting standards of the banks are as per the standards which the central bank wishes for. There will always be issues when financial institutions, especially the banks, they adopt third-party technology solutions. One is integrating their systems with the external parties from a data security perspective, from a data sharing perspective, from a data privacy perspective, etc., etc. So banks and the regulators would be very, very wary. So the way I look at it is, and there are all kind of banks. There are very traditional banks who have just not adopted any technology. There are banks which wish to adopt technology. But I think the good part here is that all the banks who do large scale retail business, and I'm speaking about the agriculture and rural sector here, they realize that what we spoke of earlier, the transaction cost and the risk, the portfolio risk that they carry, they need technology to be able to address this issue. So that realization is there, but they may not have the knowledge of how to access technology which is safe to use, which is useful for them. So the process is to work with them, build up the pilots, keep informing the central banks about what they are doing, and if possible, get the blessings of the central banks. On the other side, it is also advisable that technology players like you get together or you individually, you reach out to the regulators and you keep educating them and informing them of the solutions you have. Possibly, coax the central banks to work on a sandbox approach where you can work with a few financial institutions to work on some solutions. Uh, Under a very watertight situation so that the central bank realizes that the technology is safe and it's good for the banking sector. It brings in efficiency. It leads to climate financing, inclusive financing. So you will have to do a lot of work of working with different kind of financial institutions and different regulators across the world.
That's very interesting. Thank you, Arindam. Indeed, there have been quite a few international banks of repute like Rabobank and even multilaterals like IFC who have backed such kind of innovative technology for enhancing smallholder financing across the world. So, can you share what has been the experience of such organizations with geospatial technology in BFSI?
Prateep, the way I look at it is, agriculture financing, that's farmer financing, especially smallholder farmers, is mostly the domain of local financial institutions, whether they are non-banks, whether they are large domestic retail financing institutions, or they are microfinance institutions. The large global banks do not usually get into farmer financing because it's regulatory very, very complex. And second is the farmers, they need the capital in local currency, which most of the international banks will not be able to provide. Now, having said that, it's the mission of some of the large global banks and the DFIs of the world to ensure that flow of credit goes to the agriculture sector, again, from a food security, from a climate perspective, from an inclusive perspective, and from an income perspective. So what they do usually is they work with local financial institutions, they make investments into them, they provide them with debt products, and they also provide a lot of expertise to these retail operators on the ground who do agriculture financing, and they get in global expertise. And that's the role of these large organizations, to be able to identify the right kind of technology, remote sensing solutions, satellite imagery solutions, test them, and then bring them to a cohort of financial institutions with whom they are working, and that can be done at a global scale. So these institutions are very, very useful for partnerships. And that's the kind of partnership we should seek, because they'll be able to diffuse it far easier to their partner financial institutions across the world, especially in the emerging markets.
That's great advice. Thank you, Arindam. Indeed, at SatSure, we have been engaged with some of these, pilots, and definitely, it seems like what we are building here in India is definitely relevant. Also, in many of the developing countries, which face a similar kind of problems in agriculture and agriculture financing. So, on a parting note, before we close, would like to ask one last question, which is, what would be your advice to the geospatial sector in general, while building tools and products for the BFSI sector?
Prateep, a very interesting question. And I'm saying it's interesting because you guys have so much of expertise and experience of using technology, whether it's remote sensing, AI, ML, and all these other kind of new age, cutting edge technology. Most of the ecosystem players, the real sector, food and agri players, the financial institutions, the local MFIs, they do not have expertise in all these technology. So, and you guys also, your technology solution providers, you don't do the financing, you don't participate in the agri supply chain activities directly. So it's very, very important that you don't come up with a one size fits all kind of solution, but you work with these players to build up bespoke solutions which is required in certain markets because of agroclimatic reason, because of the kind of soil and water availability and other factors, both cultural soft factors and also the environment factors, which are relevant for your solution to enhance businesses in different geographies. So what I would suggest is, what SDG 17 talks of, that's collaboration and partnership. That's the way to go, because agriculture is such a complicated sector. The challenges of agriculture are so complicated. You need partnership to be able to bring up the right, appropriate, cost-efficient technologies to work with the players in the supply chain. So my advice would be build a partnership, work out solutions, see what works, scale it up, replicate it, and build up multiple solutions which are required for different crops, different agroclimatic regions, and different kind of cultural contexts in which it could work. So work with them and build up solutions together. That's the important message I would like to convey.
Thank you so much for that message. Indeed, partnerships are the way to move forward for sure, and it's a big ecosystem. So it's a tough one, and the impact is huge. It's not limited to India. India itself is big, but the impact could be global here. So definitely, I think these are very, very wise words of advice, Arindam. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and for your time. With this, I would like to just summarize for our viewers some of the key highlights of this discussion from my point of view, which were the use of geospatial data for improving cost efficiencies of doing business in agriculture, especially when it's large scale business in agriculture, such as banking. Improving the risk perception of especially the climate risk part and the impact of it on the credit risk when you're financing farmers. And last but not the least, the importance of the geospatial sector, and rather the role it can play in really enabling or unlocking finance for the agri sector. So those would be my three key highlights. Now again, on behalf of SatSure team, I would like to thank you, and hope we look forward to also having you in Rotterdam at GWF in May.
Thank you, Prateep, and I wish you all the best. And we look forward to the event in Rotterdam next month, and we look forward to hearing from experts like you and other players, other global players, about the solutions they are providing to solve some of the real problems of the world. Thank you so much, Prateep.
Thank you.